Hello and welcome to Plugging Along, a stream dedicated to LOTRO plugins. Last time on Plugging Along, we were working on the deed tracker plugin, and we updated the save file format to use quest IDs instead of deed IDs for those conflicting quests. Those quests that had the same name as deeds. For instance, Warg Slayer, the name of 7 or so deeds, and also a quest in the North Downs. And so, we have the anniversary festival going right now, and I thought it might make sense to return to the Festival Buddy plugin today. We'll start by showing how to gather announcement strings for the Flurry of Fireworks quest in other languages, which I haven't done yet. I have been sent a sampling of them by someone, so if we don't have enough time to complete that today, no problem. But just in case you yourself are wondering how might you go about doing that easily, this will be a way forward. And while we let those strings get gathered, I noticed that Little Redhead had to manually dismiss that helper frame, and I'd like to go ahead and fix that while we're at it. So let's go ahead and get started here. As always, feel free to jump into chat with your thoughts and questions. Pretty much anything is on topic if it is LOTRO related, but of course we do talk a lot about plugins here. Okay, so I'm going to go start out by getting myself over to Bree. Sorry, Glenn Hellig, I like standing here, I like the music, but you don't have a fireworks announcer. So, one of the first things we're going to do is need to switch over to a different language. Right now we're using the English client, and that's not going to be useful for gathering French or German strings. But the technique, Arthur points out, fireworks from Glenn Hellig would be awesome. I agree. The technique we're going to use is just the very simple one of the chat logging. And so what we want to do is create a new tab, and this is going to be our we're going to have say, hopefully. And what we want to do is make sure that the fireworks announcer appears in this tab. I may have been just after, but I want to make sure that the next one shows up so that I know that I've set up the tab correctly in English, because switching it around in other languages is harder. Okay, so we got fireworks announcer saying things. Good. Excuse me. So what we're looking for is the chat logging feature. And I'm going to use the snipping tool that was mentioned over on Little Redhead's stream to go ahead and take a rectangular snip. And now I have this as a reference point. I know there's two things, start logging and capture chat. And logging is the one I'm interested in. So I've got this as a reference just to make sure that I can find the chat logging, start logging when we get to German and French. So, going to pull that off onto my other monitor, and we're going to go ahead and leave. Bye. Spectator says, well done, Affidel. I don't think so. So, one of the things that is true about Lord of the Rings Online is that you must start the game from scratch to change which language you are playing in. So you must exit out to your desktop, change the language, and come back in, launching a new client. If I had to guess, having no insider information, I would say this is based off of the framework that they're using for languages being 20 years old. More modern frameworks might support a more live switching, but on the other hand, MMOs are just fancy graphics wrapped around a whole bunch of text, and so it might just be that relaunching is like the nicest thing to do when you have to deal with that many strings. So, or text. So when we come in, the button up here that says EN at the top, that is how you change your language. So we're going to go ahead and do German first, because that's at least a little bit close to Dutch, and so I have a chance of reading things a little bit. If you have not patched in that language, you will have to patch. Doesn't necessarily mean take a lot of patching, but it'll be downloading fresh strings. I've done that before the stream here, but just watch out for that. And then if I wanted to auto fill in my login information, I have to relaunch, and there we go. So we want to go ahead and spiel in with Treebeard, or spielen perhaps. Now, I've been told, and I think it might be true, that the more deeds and quests your character has completed, the more stuff it has, sort of the longer it takes to log in, log out, that kind of thing. There's just more stuff to communicate with the server. And if that's true, then you can speed up your rapid switching between languages. Well, first of all, you can have all 3 clients running as long as you have 3 different accounts. So free-to-play accounts are great for testing multiple language stuff. Excuse me. Having a couple of free-to-play accounts are really great for testing multiple language stuff because you can have English, German, and French clients up simultaneously. Since I'm streaming right now, I thought it'd be nice to my computer and not do that. But it is an option. Why is my game sound not seeming to come into OBS? What's up with that? Well, it's supposed to be there. Oh, of course, when I exited, there we go. So yes, you can have English, German, and French running simultaneously as long as you have separate accounts for them. Beware that if you have multiple clients running from basically the same location and they try to trade with each other, that can introduce can trigger a known bug, a trade bug, which causes one of the 2 clients to exit to desktop. So if you're running multiples on the same machine, it is safer to just go ahead and mail stuff around if you have access to mailboxes, or wait to do trading until the very end of the session when you wanted to exit the game right after that. Okay, so what we can see is we want to go ahead and protocol starten, sure. And what we want to do is the Flurwerksanger, Flurwerksansanger, thank you. No, Flurwerksansager, okay. I'm reading ends where there aren't any. What we want to just do is, in the background, let a bunch of the things that the Flurwerksansager says, or sagt, pile up in this log file. But let's go ahead and take a look at what's going into that log file. Basically, it's what we see, probably without the color markups. So let's go ahead and go into our Documents folder, Lord of the Rings Online, and we can see it's just going into say. Cool. This one. And we can see, yes, indeed, we get the text, but we don't get any of the markup that we would get in an actual chat monitoring situation. That's okay. We have techniques to strip that markup off of text if we want to, or we can assume that markup is the same as in other situations. And so this file is being written to every time something comes into this tab, and we can see that little icon is saying that there's an active logging situation going on. The file is immediately updated. Some plugins, I think the Prime plugin, takes advantage of this by using this to communicate with an external program which is monitoring that file for changes. So your plugin can put something into standard which can go into a log file immediately, and that can trigger the action of a third-party program. I think they use that for activating audio cues, which is a fascinating workaround to the fact that plugins can't normally make sound happen. Okay, so this is just happening in the background. We're going to go ahead and just close that down and let it go. And in the meantime, what we're interested in is Festival Buddy, and specifically how it works when you are done with the quest. So if I go ahead and accept this quest, we can see Festival Buddy didn't automatically do anything with that because it wasn't on the anniversary. So it wasn't paying attention to quests in a different festival. I don't think that's necessarily the right thing to do since festival quests don't really overlap, so that could be a thing to change. Here, let's go ahead and auto detect any quest, not just the current selected anniversary festival question mark, because if you get I was calling it Flurry and Fireworks. If you get the Fireworks and Brie quest, well, it doesn't matter what your festival was. There's only one festival that has Fireworks and Brie, so that makes a certain amount of sense. Okay, so what we don't have is a corresponding set of strings that tells the plugin which one of these cells to highlight, and that makes us sad. So normally this would sit on top of your existing one. The correct cells would highlight and give you a hint as to what to do. We're just going to have to go ahead and deal with it. I think that says green. Cool. Alright. Well, hopefully that's saying yes to blah. So the trouble with doing this with a different language is that half the messages are we do want a color and half of them are we do not want a color. So only blue or anything but blue. And so I'm having to scan the German real fast to make sure I'm doing the right one. Yay. So there's a little bit of a language learning or language coping skills that you can benefit from if you're doing multi-language support in a plugin, or you just find a sucker or a helper who already does that language. All right, hopefully that's saying impress them with a red and not impress them with not a red. Excellent. Okay. Anything but red. Cool. This is not the time for red. So what we're looking for is not yellow. What we're looking for, and actually I should go ahead and I should have set up a quest channel as well. I wonder if I can do that. Nope. That wasn't what I meant to do. I couldn't tell if I already have the maximum number of tabs open. Okay. I think that says red. Hooray. And all this time, this say channel continues to log into our log file. And so we're going to be able to pick out just the ones that the Vierwerksansager says and compile that together. Now, once someone has done it, it's kind of unnecessary for everyone to do it. But again, it's nice to have the technique in hand. Just in case you are the first person. How would you do this? Send the blue. Cool. And so this is a simple way. You can also write plugins to kind of capture this information, and then if you do care about these color markups, you can process those as well and put those out, re-emit them into standard tweaks such that the markups are readable. Sure, green. Send it out so the markups is readable, so you know exactly what text to expect. But this is the simple version. Just start some chat logging and get a large enough sample where you can believe that you have all of them. So we'll just leave that going until, or really as long as we can. Now, Little Redhead ran a little late tonight, which is excellent because this quest is only available during nighttime on the server that you are at. And while I think nighttime happens at different times for different servers, it was very nice to have it available here. I think that says anything but red. Let's find out. Phew! Okay, now, when we got the message, and we can see it in the chat there. Let me just drag it down a little bit. When we got, nope, it's already gone. Yeah, let me copy that. So when we saw the message, you've done 10 out of 10. Two things happen. We get the ability to speak with Vanna Birnbaum, and the helper bar, the skill bar, disappeared. Interestingly, it's disappeared from the screen as well. Oh, when I pressed escape, it disappeared. Excellent. His title is so long. I mean, he's a Fireworks coordinator. I mean, Fireworks coordinator in English is just about the same length. Hey, Lord Zach, how's it going? Yeah, the German tendency to unspecify compound words is, yeah, it doesn't jibe with how a lot of people in the United States do it, but you know, in a certain sense, it kind of makes sense. Like, if you want to emphasize that these things are together, sometimes I'll be like, well, I want to specify that these words go together, I'll just use hyphens, because in English I can't just squish them together without spaces without seeming like a madman. Whereas this feels like a perfectly reasonable way to do compound words, as long as everyone is agreeing that that's how you do compound words. Lord Zach says spaces in German are just a suggestion. I don't think so. I think you would be seen as doing it wrong if you spelled that with a space. Maybe not that specific word, but some other compound words. Like, just like you would spell that with a space in United States English, probably British English as well. In German, I suspect that would look wrong if you didn't, or if you did use a space. And, you know, so I don't think it's just a suggestion. I think they just approach compound words differently. And whether that's good or not, like, I kind of like hyphens. Like, it definitely shows that they're attached without you having to manually find a word boundary. Fireworks coordinator was pretty easy for me to parse because, you know, we're right next to the Fireworks Ansacher. But still, you know. Okay, so when we get this message, you've done 10 out of 10, that tells us that the overlay can go away. So let's go ahead and bring this in to our notes. Okay. So German, this. Also, the frame should not go away when you press escape, question mark. I don't know if that's true, but currently it does, and I think probably it shouldn't, because the thing it's supposed to be, the thing it's supposed to be overlaying doesn't go away. Now, I don't want to actually complete this quest, because then I could just log in with a different character. Nah, I don't want to complete this one, so I'm going to go ahead and abbrechen it. Oh, good, that was abandoned. Hooray for muscle memory. And then I'll be able to pick it up again in a couple minutes, or just switch to another character. Lord Zach says, so IT systems analyst would be systems Analytica Informaties Technology. Yeah, probably. You know, hard to say. Dutch language does a little bit too. Like, if you want, like, what is it? Housing association. You know, woningbouwvereniging. It doesn't have spaces in it, I don't think. And so you get that sort of same compound word, like woning, residence, and woningbouw is you know, place of residence, and vereniging is association. But you just squish them together, woningbouwvereniging, into one word. And you know, again, consensus is the important thing. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer, though I do think parsing it would be easier with hyphens. But even spaces, if all of your words are separated by spaces, then you have the same opposite problem for detecting a compound noun, right? Like, where does the compound start? Where does it stop? And you can have sentences that are ambiguous, that read either as this is a compound or they're all separate. And it can take several times a back and forth parsing to be like, oh, okay, no, I've definitely got it. Like, yeah. So without doing things like I spoke with the fireworks coordinator today. Like, if you had a sentence like this, like, in German, you've got the solution of just squish it together. Cool, but now you've got to parse where the word breaks are inside the word. In English, you just have spaces, and you're like, cool, where, if any, are there compound words? If you had hyphens, that would sort of call out that, cool, here's where the things are. I kind of like the idea of, brackets or something. This is the start, this is the stop. In which case, maybe you would or would not need the hyphens, but why not have a little redundancy? But I feel like this parses, like, there's very obviously a compound thing in there. And, less obviously so when you don't have any delimiters. Or, maybe some new delimiters, like start and stop of compound. Ah, well. Anyway. So, if I were doing a language capture for Realzy, I would probably let this play out for an hour or two in the background while I was doing other things on my computer, because I don't want to go offline AFK where the system just logs me out. So I do want to move my mouse occasionally over the screen and then go back to what I'm doing, playing games, watching videos, whatever. And so I would let this go kind of based off of context, right? The Flurwerksansacher has a lot of variations in English. And so naively, I would have to guess that they have similar varieties in other languages. I would guess that each string has been translated instead of recreating that whole thing. So if we come into the English strings, we can see patterns, right? Fireworksannouncer says, how about a bright X one? Launch it now. How about something besides X? Launch it now. Let's dazzle the crowd. Quickly, launch something. Send up a whatever. Send up anything except this is not the time. So we've got all of these messages. And because of the variety of these, we have, what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 40 different messages that I know of in English. And so for you to feel comfortable that you've seen them all, given that he only does them maybe 4 times a minute, so yeah, after 10 minutes you've seen 40 messages, but the chance for repetition means you really want it to run longer than that. Little Redhead points out, like the one-eyed, one-horned, flying purple people eater, what do they eat? That's for anyone who's not familiar. Yeah, for anyone who's not familiar, there's a song with the titular character of a one-eyed, one-horned, flying purple people eater, but the hyphens are, they're not all over. So is the eater of people, or of purple people, or of flying purple people, or what? And so it could definitely use with some bracketing. Okay, so yes, based on the number of different strings you expect, you should kind of gauge how long you wait based off of that. But you can also come on in and say, hey, let's see how far we've done so far. Now, if you're using a program like Sublime Text, where you can do really easy textual manipulation, then you're in luck. You're in luck, where you can go ahead and say, let's just select all the Flurwerksansacher text that we have so far and bring that into a new space. And actually, I didn't need those timestamps. Let's get rid of those. So what we can just do now is go ahead and sort those lines and go ahead and just get the unique versions of them. And we can see we've already seen 29 unique versions of text. We can definitely also see that we've got some very strange quotations going on. Is that normal? Are we seeing that? What's going on here? My mistake. If you're going to do this, you want to turn off word wrapping. Otherwise, you'll clip what you're aiming to copy. Nope, that's the wrong key. So we're going to go ahead and redo this. Okay. And so, same thing, we'll go ahead and turn off the word wrapping, but the sorting of the lines and the just finding the unique lines, because again, if your text editor allows you to both do sorts and unique permutations natively, then you're in luck. If not, the second best thing is probably just to copy it into Excel, and then you can do sorts and text manipulations and what there. But what we've got here is, oh, now we've got 32 of them. We've got 32 unique strings, and that's really promising because we can see patterns here. Like we can see 3 of this, 4 of that. Uncertain if those are the same or different, but we can see the clumps of patterns that we're getting. Lord Zach says, like in regex, start and end with a firework coordinator. Now, funny enough that you say that, Lord Zach. Yeah, the question of whether or not to use, in this case, as Egg Arthur points out, it's best to go ahead and call them pattern matching rather than regexes. Regexes implies capabilities that perhaps are not available, although a lot of the basic stuff is available in lieu of pattern matching. That being said, every time I think regexes, or patterns in this case, I think those are kind of expensive. Do I want to spin up sort of a mini compiler to take a regex pattern and put it into its own little miniature program and do a thing? Now, patterns in Lua are simpler, but I assume in the back of my head that there is a computational cost to running a pattern, and I also assume there's a mental cost to writing a pattern. And since there's a finite number of patterns here, the question is it really better to have a regex, or just to say, here's what the possible patterns are, and here's what it means when you get them? And so by just coordinating, collecting together each of the things that we can see, and just what color is it, and is it yes we want it or no we don't want it, then we kind of bypass the need for a regex. We just say, we should see this exact thing. If there were more variety in what the fireworks announcer could say, if the fireworks announcer, instead of having 10 different things, had 100 different things, then I would lean more towards pattern matching. Because at that point, you have a lot of effort to create and maintain, potentially, just a table like that. But if you have a small enough set of strings, then there's the question of, there's the memory usage of, you need to have, all 40 of these strings in memory. But then there's the, it is super fast to just say, is this equal to that? Yes, no. Instead of doing a full-on pattern matching of a string to be like, oh, now a pattern match, if it doesn't take a lot to spin up that pattern match, is going to know really fast if it starts with fireworks announcer or not. So this is probably all micro optimizations that don't matter anywhere except in my head. Really, you do you, right? It's fine. The rate that things come into the say channel is not fast enough to really make a difference one way or the other in this. This is just what I was thinking, is it's just as easy just to spell them out, and then we don't, like, if I did not spell these out, if I was doing regexes, I would still have these in the comments of the code because I know these are the things I'm looking for. And I would still probably have 10 of these because I need to know what the text is so I can strip out the color and correlate 5 of each of those for positives and 5 for negative. And it felt like it was going to be a lot of work to sort that out through pattern matching instead of just list them out. No problem. And then it feels a lot more obviously correct to look at this and see, oh yes, it's going to work, as long as you have the strings for it. So that's all. That's what's going on there. So again, if you are just sitting here monitoring chat like this, then eventually you're going to come to a point where you say, okay, I've got enough of these. So how many do we have? Unique, cool. So we've got 33 different ones. We were expecting 40. We could at any point go ahead and stop and extrapolate out what we expect the rest of them to look like. I think I even had that problem with the English. I think I saw 39 of them come across, and I just said, you know what, I'm just going to fill in the 40th one and call it good, because I don't need to actually see it. It's fine. So yes. So Agartha says Lua doesn't have regex natively. It has patterns. In another plugin, I use pattern captures to extract the color of the firework and whether it's positive or negated. Yeah, totally a valid way to do it. Really just your tolerance for pattern matching. When Zach says it's weird. Lars says, try Fuhrwerks und Sache. Is that a better pronunciation? I'm trying to pronounce a German word with what I would think a Dutch pronunciation of it is, and it's almost certainly not right. Agartha says you could also put Cygwin on Windows and use Linux tools or Nix tools like sort. Yeah, I have in the past run Cygwin, and Sublime Text has replaced my most common uses for it, specifically grep. I'll just do a folder search in Sublime Text, and it's probably not quite as fast as a grep through files, but it's fine. Like, it works. If I need something more complicated, I probably wasn't going to use grep anyway. And then, yeah, things like sorting, things like doing uniques are just so fast and easy in Sublime Text or even in Excel that my needs for Cygwin Nix specific tools is just like, is it worth the effort? So I wonder if I even have that installed. Nope. Lord Zach says, I'm seeing blouse and blauen is set the same color but in different use. Agartha says genitive versus accusative if they remember correctly. Yeah, there's conjugation things for adjectives in Dutch as well, but I think less complicated. Lord Zach has a big thunderstorm here in real life. Lord Zach, I can't remember which continent you're on or which country you're in. Agartha says, by the way, all the negatives have either nicked some form of onder or osser in them. Yeah, that is probably true, but again, I'm probably going to be really lazy and just stick them in whole and just equate them into one of these. And once you have blue yes, green yes, red yes, yellow yes, or blue no, green no, red no, yellow no, then the rest of it's really easy. Let's see, what do these look like? Oh, this is yes. I'm re-implementing a bit mask here. Why not? Really, I was just looking for simple unique values. Cool. Wait, was I? Hang on. Bonkers. I don't remember why I did that. Yeah, so Lord Zach, that's what I would do, is I would take all of these, I would stick them into my array here, and then I would just assign it, possibly using Google Translate just so I don't trip up on what's going on. I would assign it to various, blue yes, green yes, red yes, yellow yes, or the no's. And then once that's done, the code just works. Once you have the proper language strings, the code's off and running. And so that's what's going on with these strings. That's why I would collect them, is I would want to feel confident that I could fill in these 40. And then once we have that, what does the code do? What a great question. It's been a year since I wrote it, so let's find out what it does. Okay. So we can see the definition of it and where it is assigned. And so what we do with it is let's back up a little bit. Okay, highlight allowed fireworks. Let's find that. Great. All right, handle fireworks and answer say. We're just working backwards through here. Okay, so. Yes, Lord Zach, sorry. I got so tied up in the code. So what happens is, what we try to do is we draw our own overlay on the screen, and what we do is just highlight the cells that are good. Like, this is primarily useful for someone like me who gets distracted, or I'm talking to someone in the room, or I'm watching a video, or I'm reading a book, or whatever, and I look up, and the text over the fireworks announcer's head is gone. And there's chatter and chat, and I don't know how long it's been since they said it. Even with timestamps, now I have to do math. What time is it right now? How long has it been? Is there still time to launch a firework? It's too much mental effort for me to care to spend on this quest. I'd rather spend that mental effort writing a plugin to help me deal with it, if I'm going to spend it anywhere. And so what happens is, these just highlight, and in fact, we might be able to see this. If we come into the plugin manager, and sorry, just realizing that I don't have debug options on necessarily. Yeah, let's set show debug options to true. And I'm going to go ahead and unload and reload the festival buddy here. And so what we can go ahead and do is use our debug options here to demonstrate what would happen. So if we say, red, how about a bright red one, launch it now? This is what we would expect to see in the UI. Or red, no, how about something besides red, launch it now? And so what you would just do is you would take this overlay, stick it on top of the actual skill bar that you get from the festival, and then you're good to go. Yes, blue, this is what it would look like. No blue, this is what it would look like. And so as you're sitting here, you get both the thing that popped up and how long you have until it is too late to activate it safely. When this runs out, you have about 2 seconds, or about the length of the induction of this thing, before the announcer will announce the next thing. And so it's not, you have a 2-second gap where it's not safe to launch anything. Or however long the induction is. Yep, 2 seconds. So absolutely, Lord Zach, thank you for asking what the motivation of all of this was. But that's it. We just want to highlight the thing that that is safe to push, and then leave it up to the user to decide whether or not they want to do that. Now notice, plugins can't activate those skills, so we can't just run this quest for the user. But what we can do is provide a visual clue, especially because if you have any sort of color deficiency, I don't know, but these may not seem very distinct, and so you might just have to remember the order, which doesn't sound very fun. Or you could pop off the tooltips here as a reference. Hang on a sec. Why is the red one without a red name? I've heard that the translations in the German and French, admirable the goal is, are sometimes a little less than 100%. And so when I see something like this, where this has green, blue, and yellow, and this one is just, nope, there's just plain, is that intentional, or did they miss the red prefix, or some other thing? And it makes me wonder. Anyway. So yeah, you can pull off those tooltips with, I want to say it's like H or something. Yes. It's D on my keyboard. Oops. But H on a normal QWERTY keyboard. You can pull those off. But yeah, if you have any sort of color vision impairment, you might have a tricky time with that. And if you have distraction issues, as I do, you would have trouble with it. Lord Zach says, I've noticed sometimes when translating things to German, it will remove words. Yep, I'm not going to try to second guess it, but I see things and I think it's interesting. Like station and train station will output the same. Yeah, I can see that. There's implications, like in the Netherlands, where I have a little bit more familiarity and still get things very wrong. Like if you're looking for a public transit thing that is for like buses, then that is a halte, or like a halt, a stop. And if you're looking for a place where trains stop, then that's a station, and so a station might also have places for buses to stop. And then I assume you'd still just, those are the bus haltes, maybe. But yeah, like a station is sort of implicitly a train station, because what else would it be? As long as you're talking about public transit. And so you might spell it out in American English to be like, no, I mean a train station, not one of those other stations. Checking my loot says a bus station. Maybe. Yeah. What would it be in Dutch? Okay. You got me curious. Fortunately, Dutch is right next to English. Yeah, so maybe a bus station, if you wanted to clarify that it's a place where a lot of buses arrive, but is not just a bus stop. But I guess, yeah, the default would be train, and then if you want to clarify, maybe it's bus. Or maybe there's just no point in clarifying, and the place where lots of mass transit converges is a station. Whether it's trains or buses or trams or trolleys. I don't know. Okay, cool. So we've got our chat crawler continuing to work, just in case we come across more things. We can see lots more things have come in. Awesome. So let's look at the code that causes the frame to appear and disappear, because something's going wrong with the disappearing. When you complete the quest, it doesn't go away, and I would like it to. So fireworks event quick slot window sounds like the right place to be. And what we want to do is figure out, when do you go away? Lord Zach says, not plugin related, but can I get good stuff from silver coins? What do you mean by silver coins? Oh, excellent, Lord Zach. When killing mobs, you randomly get coins. Yes. In the English client, it'll be steel tokens. And if you come on down to the, oh my goodness, I wonder if my travel skills will work. Rice. Lalia's Market, great. Yeah, if in a different client, I'm not sure what they would be called, but I can tell you what they'll be called in German. So come on into the Three Boar statue area, market square, and in this area behind this stone wall, this is active during the anniversary festival, and you'll want to come on over to Angelina, and you'll see this steel token, or Schildmünze, as the bartering token for what you can do here. Most notable, there's receipts for fireworks, and there are one of the types of torches. And if you launch off, I want to say 100 of them, or some number of them, you can earn a skill that lets you just summon out a torch at will. So that's pretty cool to strive for. And then there's lots of different outfits as well. Cool. So yes, excellent question. As you're getting those steel tokens, I don't think there's any limit on how many you can have. So if you don't find a use for them this festival, you'll just keep them, yep, no limit. You'll just keep them around in your wallet. They look like they are per character though, so watch out for that. So yeah, go have a visit. This is also where you would come to find the Games Master or Spielleiter. Cool. Where you can spend both anniversary tokens, festival tokens and the festivity tokens. And then if you want to go spend Mithril coins, you can come over and talk to this one maybe. Yeah, look at all those 70 Mithril coins. Do I look like I have that many? I do not. I did actually burn 2 the other day. I was jumping into a Drygok raid, and I hadn't done the unlock quest on this character, and I'd forgotten to because for a little while there, the unlock was broken. You could just go in, even without having done the unlock quest, and we were playing, the Frogger game at the beginning just for funsies. And then they fixed that, and then there were people like, hey, we've got like 10 out of 12 for Drygok, and I was like, wait for me! So, use my personal port over to Galtrev, pick up the quest, coin up to Nars Peak, set my milestone, run down the cliff, and grab the map, pop back up, go in, drop it off, and then get summoned over to Drygok. So, with 1 or 2 Mithril coins, you can do that unlock really fast if you've got your travel skills. And Sex says, I spent a coin the other day because I didn't want to walk to Forachel. Fair. Oh, checking says, I recently got back from a 7-year hiatus and found I had 40,000 LOTRO points on my lifetime account, so I have Mithril to burn. Very nice. Yes, that is excellent. I have a few LOTRO points, both from in-game play and just being a sucker and purchasing some with real-world money. And it does relieve some of the pressure points of the game. Like some of the necessary constraints of MMO is you have a finite inventory space, and I don't want to have to worry about inventory space. So some carry-alls, some travel cooldowns, because I just want to get to a place and not necessarily worry about traveling there. It's all lovely. Lord Zach says it's called HDRO in German. Der Herr der Ringe Online. So yes. And something else in French. Okay, so Arcee is still dumping stuff, even though we moved away from the area and back in. Oh, Lord Zach, you know French, of course. Yeah, and in Dutch, it's in de baan van de ring. There's no lord whatsoever. It's just under the influence of the ring. Which I think is nice, because then you avoid the ambiguity of, is the Lord of the Rings Sauron, or is the Lord of the Rings the One Ring to rule all the other rings? I mean, that's the natural way to read the poem, right? Is one ring to rule them all. Cool, that's the Lord of the other rings, and Sauron is the Lord of the One Ring. So Sauron is Lord of the Ring, and the ring is Lord of the Rings. But you avoid that whole ambiguity if you just call it under the influence of the rings or something like that. Checking says, is there an add-on that disguises or removes the account name from the store window? I'd rather my viewers not see my account name if I bring it up to buy something. So, not as such. The short answer is modifying the UI isn't in the purview of plugins, but you can do some pretty nifty thing with skins. Gotta spell it without a slash. And while I don't know enough about skins to give you a straight answer, it is possible that it is possible to reskin the shop in such a way as to remove or mask this. I just have a gibberish one instead. But second to that, Little Red had pointed out that there's a plugin called Opaque Quest Tracker. All it does is put an opaque thing on the underneath the quest area over here on the right, and you could very much write a plugin that just has an opaque section on top of all the LOTRO windows. You can set your Z order to always be on top, and you could have it automatically position itself where the LOTRO store is. So you could have a little plugin icon right here next to the shop that you press right before you do the shop. It slaps a black bar up onto the screen right here. You could even cover your LOTRO points if you're embarrassed at how many you have. And it would be, you could set it up to not intercept mouse clicks. So if you wanted to drop down this menu, you still could. If you wanted to add LOTRO points, you still could. But it would block that from naive viewing. So you would manually activate it, activate the shop. The shop would be underneath that opaque rectangle, and you would go from there. So this is very possible to do. To my knowledge, there is not such an option, not such a plugin right now. But if one was interested in making it, I would encourage them to just start with the opaque quest tracker and simplify it down. We don't need all the customizability. We just need a opaque square that pops up on the screen and redacts that information. So I don't know if that's a good answer for you, Chuckim. I don't know if you have any plugin experience, but that would be where I would start. Is you can draw a thing on the screen. You can even have the ability to move it around if you need to, but that's extra work. And unfortunately, it wouldn't be sticky. It wouldn't stick to the shop. So unless you've been able to skin your way out of the problem, you wouldn't be able to move the shop without that being, without bringing that stuff out from under the redaction box. But as long as you're willing to not touch the position of the shop, leave it in the center of the screen, wherever its default is. I don't actually know. Does it revert if you move it? It does. So it always goes to the same spot. So you can consistently just set it up ahead of time. And so that would be my answer. Is if it's not a skinning solution, there is a way to address the problem with a plugin, but it's an incomplete solution because the plugin doesn't know that you're dragging the shop window around. But checking, feel free to come back next week and kind of report back and say, here's what I found. Here's I was able to do this. I couldn't do that. And maybe we can play around with making this happen. I think it's an interesting idea. Because yeah, I have that same thing. Is I'm a streamer. I just have a gibberish username in there, so hopefully it's not a problem. But I also have a ridiculously long and complicated password for LOTRO because I would prefer not to lose my account. But just in case, like definitely, I would point out if you are a streamer and are at all worried about someone seeing your account name, do make sure your password is long and complicated, so that even if they have the username, they're still basically not going to get in. Like, don't have your password be something simple, anything simple. If it's 8 characters or fewer, that is too few. Tolkien says, you suppose you could just use a blurred color source in OBS. That's a point. Since this comes up in a fixed point, you don't even need an in-game solution. You can just have a source in OBS that you activate, bring up the store, and then you've got a redaction in OBS instead. And then you can still see what it is. So that's a really nice idea for the streamer side of things. Lord Zach says... oh, I think there's an option to make the store open on an external browser. Did they remove it? I recall them having consistent issues with that feature, and I don't know. And I'm not going to be able to find it in the German options. So I'm going to stop looking. I recall them struggling with integrating that feature in, but I don't remember where it settled on. Study Eddie asks, did you ever try and do classes with Lua? From looking at the documentation, it looks quite cumbersome. I'm not sure if it's a good idea. So there are classes available through the Turbine files that are pretty straightforward. Let's see. We are not using them, it would appear, in this plugin, and that's fine. Let me draw up a... That's not going to work. They're not there. Let me put my cube plugins back a moment. There we go. And let me go ahead and open one of mine. I go back and forth. I find it handy, but there's just enough little extra stuff that for simple plugins I often don't bother. Now that I've figured out how to roll in the turbine files in without needing an external dependency, I'm probably going to do it a lot more reliably. So let's take a look at one that does do this. So once you've got the turbine files, and let me go ahead and pull those up here. So yeah, normally it would just be import turbine.class or something like that. I've incorporated that file into my file structure, so it's not in the it's not an external dependency anymore. But once you've got that, you're going to declare a name as equals a class, and you're going to say what it derives from. And this is not as strongly typed as something like a C++ C# class would be, I don't think, but it does kind of do the polymorphism thing that you would expect. And so in this case, we're using a singleton because why not? I'm really not a huge fan of singletons, but it does solve some problems. And so we're just assigning to this thing the instance, and that instance variable is the one that we're going to use. So for the window, and so let's see. You're going to need a constructor function, and that'll do whatever you need to do. In this case, we're basically assigning it to the thing that we get from that to that singleton, so we can have easy access to it. And we set some other variables. But you'll have a constructor function. You will want to call the base constructor. And then once you've got your declaration of what it is, you've got your constructor, you call your base constructor. That's a manual thing. That's not done syntactically. And then when you're doing it, when you're yeah, okay. So when it's time to actually instantiate the thing, we do this inside the DTracker win class, but you have this this syntax that just says basically call the constructor, and then we know in that constructor that we're going to go ahead and get that instance. The self is probably returned from the constructor under the covers. We're not doing that explicitly. So I don't know if this makes it seem more cumbersome or less cumbersome, but you have a class declaration. You write yourself a constructor. You make sure to dispatch to the base class constructor, and then you can make new things that are a little more object oriented. You do not need to, but I like the name spacing of things especially, because if you have a couple of different window classes, you're going to end up with a lot of draw win functions. And you can just do the variation, draw a main win, draw a custom win, draw a color win, draw whatever. But all of these functions sit in your namespace, and going ahead and drawing those names, variable names, function names into the class feels like a nice way to tidy up your namespace. And then yeah, you can just have draw win implemented a dozen times across a dozen different classes, and they're all distinct versions of the same function. And it solves that problem a little bit of, instead of calling a function and passing a thing and you're hoping you're passing the right thing, you call the function on the thing, and if the thing doesn't have that function, then you're going to get a runtime error. So maybe you would have gotten a runtime error anyway. All right, DT points out it's Steam that has issues with external store, so it's disabled in the Steam version, works fine in the normal one. I never used Steam to launch LOTRO, and so I miss out on some of the technological challenges therein. I rather thought it was mandatory to use the external store in Steam, but doesn't use Steam. Okay, so Steady Eddie says, this looks nice. I imagine this abstraction is something Turbine have done, as implementing your own classes seems to be a lot more complex. Probably, yeah. Well, at least once upon a time, they passed in class, and this is not a long function. Sorry, not a long file. Just a couple hundred lines, plus the helper type, which is another couple hundred lines. But it's doing a lot of modifying of the global namespace or declaring functions in the global namespace. And so there's stuff going on where it is adding functionality into the global namespace, including that class keyword that we saw. So this thing that we see here, where equals class whatever, that's a function in the global namespace. That does a thing with the stuff that you just got. So we're variadic parameters. We know we're passing in a type here. So what does that look like? Equals static class. Cool. Looks like that's a different function that was declared. Passing in, so we have the arguments, and then we go on. So, class can only have a single base class. I haven't actually spent a lot of time reading this. Understanding the underlying how Lua works is one of my weaknesses as a Lua user for plugins. I know a lot of the normal stuff, how to do loops, how to do call functions and all that, but this underlying stuff that they're doing to implement object-oriented features on top of Lua, I would have to spend some time reading through to really understand it, because it's not something that's like I look at and it's like, oh, of course, I know exactly what they're doing. But I understand what they're trying to do, I think. Anyway, so if you are looking to use those, you are going to want to head on over to the LOTRO interface site and do a search for Turbine. And there's a couple different versions. They're kind of basically the same, but you can just download them and kind of compare, make sure the files are actually the same. So if you go to Turbine Classes and Examples, hit download, then we're going to go ahead and see in here, there's a bunch of basically helper files, right? Like files that introduce object-oriented. Let's go ahead and extract that. Great. So yeah, the class file for object-oriented stuff. If you want extra helpers for various things, you can see, oh, there's Matthew Tills. There's Quicksort of all things. Why not? No need to write your own. The Matthew Tills is add a round function. Cool. Okay. I want to say that that will behave badly with negative numbers. So if you pass a negative 1.4 and we add in 0.5, we're going to get 0.9, and then we floor that, you're going to get 0. No. Well, how does floor work? You might get 1. Depends how floor works in the presence of negative numbers. Not curious enough to look at it, but edge cases, gotta think about those. If you're looking for timers or timer managers, or if you're looking for what was the other thing in there? Oh yeah, event dispatching. Like if you're looking for multiple multiple dispatch instead of just a single event handler, you can find some starting points here. Although a lot of plugin developers roll their own, either because they don't like this one or they don't know about it. Not sure which. So there's interesting stuff in here, right? And there's a lot of helpful, potentially helpful things in there. But again, it's one of those things where I tend to forget about it until I'm like, oh, I wonder if they have that. And I would do well to spend a few hours just kind of digging into this more. And maybe it'd be worth writing up some documentation of what's here and how to use it, because I feel like there's some hidden gems. Or maybe I just don't know well enough, and there are not. Okay. Awesome. Agarth says, many plugins find their own classes at a certain point of complexity. It makes sense. Yeah. That's a part of it. If I think a plugin is going to be really small, like 2 files, the object-oriented nature of it doesn't buy you that much, and the effort of making it happen is like, I can always add it in later, right? I can always classify the type and add the class prefix to the functions and change some stuff up, and poof. And if it was small enough to justify not being a class, then it should also be small enough effort to convert it to a class, as long as you catch it in time. Eddie says, thank you for explaining. You're very welcome. To the point that I have done an explanation, you are welcome. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close that. But as we can see, I think the Festival Buddy plugin doesn't use class at all. Let's see. Not the drag bar. Oh, drag bar is a third-party plugin. Drop down to the third-party plugin. Thanks, Galahad. Message box. Galahad, you do great work. Then again, the Festival Buddy is also, I think, Galahad plugins, so it would make sense that they're all being using Galahad libraries. Okay, Festival Buddy, message box, drop down, drag bar, color picker, all these sort of third-party things are coming in as classes, and I think that's the right way to do it. If you're releasing a library, probably do the extra legwork and make it and classify it up. If nothing else, again, it keeps all the functionality a little bit tighter packaged together. Oh, that's funny. So he calls it a class, but we can see it's not actually using the LOTRO class functionality. It just declares color picker as a table, and then declares a number of functions within that table. So it's not using the turbine class, but it is isolating those functions within this sort of an artificial namespace that way. Fascinating. All right, fair enough. So don't be fooled by the word class. All right, this class again, yeah, and for good or for bad, I wouldn't say this is a wrong way to do classes, but it is not friendly with the LOTRO API extension for Visual Studio Code, which doesn't necessarily like that. Then again, all that is a duplicate warning. Fascinating. All right, well, cool. Multiple ways to do classes. Yes. Okay, so the Fireworks Events Quick Slot window, which we can see is not a class. It uses a global variable for the window itself, and just has a collection of functions that operate on that variable or other variables as well. So, we're curious about how this thing gets hidden. We have a toggle visibility for fireworks. And again, that's that namespace problem where you would want maybe a toggle visibility for everything. And so you're just suffixing it with what are you toggling? In this case, fireworks. Awesome. But it is easy to find. And so that's a point in the other direction, is if all you're doing is a raw text search, then toggle visibility fireworks, very specific, and you're going to find it very easily. Toggle visibility on a type, you can't do that with plain text find tools. You would need some sort of IntelliSense. And Visual Studio Code offers some of that for find all references, but I don't get the feeling that it's like 100% the way it is on something more like a C#, where there's in a Visual Studio Code scenario where there's an underlying compiler at work where it can find those types and really do a good job at it. Your mileage may vary. Okay, so we have this function toggle fireworks in the main window. If action key escape, currently it hides that, and I don't know how I feel about that. I kind of want to say no, don't toggle on escape for now. Close helper windows should be called. Okay, we'll circle back around to that, and then when we load a quest, if the quest key equals brief fireworks, then hide it. Okay. So close helper windows. When does this get called? In festival functions, clear selected text. Should call it. So if you complete the quest, that should clear it. Okay. Maybe. We'll take a look at that. When the festivals changes, yep, that's understandable, but we're not doing that very often. Set main when visible. Interesting. Gotta make this thing more visible. So if you close the main window, I don't know what set main when visible is for other than that, but that's okay. And refresh quest guide. Fascinating. All right, you've got my curiosity. Fascinating. I don't know that I like that, but it is what it is. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so toggle visibility fireworks. We've already addressed one thing, which is I'm not sure I like the idea of toggle visibility fireworks happening just when you hit escape. If the quest is still going, that just sounds annoying. So I'm going to hold off on that. Like, that's not going to get committed necessarily today into source control, but it's a thought. Close helper windows, though, that should get called when the quest is complete. And that makes me wonder why it's not. So clear selected quest, when does that happen? Filter completed or failed quest. Great. I feel like there's functionality here that I'm going to have to play with in English mode, because if you complete or fail a quest, that should clear this quest here, and clearing this quest here, or even changing it, should hide this. So maybe there's something else going on. Like the functionality is there, apparently. It's in the code to hide this when the quest is failed or or completed. So I'm going to have to play around with failing or completing quests and see how this behaves. Okay, in the meantime, we are rapidly approaching the end of my normal time, and that is okay, because I have a pile of to-do items in the real world that are pulling me away from LOTRO, I'm afraid. So I would say, while I look at what we've gotten in this chat logging, now's a great time to put last minute thoughts, questions, concerns, and so on into chat. Which is good because it is almost morning in game, and that fireworks announcer, it is morning in game, and that fireworks announcer is not going to say anything else. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and stop the chat logging. And I'm going to go ahead and say not that, but come on into this. And again, if we're just going to do a multi-select in here, and in Sublime Text, it's Alt F3, of course it is. And we're just going to, for our third and final time, paste those in. And again, I'm just going to go ahead and use the sort and unique capabilities of this editor. If your editor doesn't have that, that's fine. And we can see that we have gotten 39 strings, which again matches my experience in English, that I'm not sure that 40th string exists, but it's nice to have it for completeness. And so we can see 1, 2, 3, although this one actually goes down here. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm actually going to put spaces here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, Blau is getting in the way there, or getting out of order here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and just using some visual lining up to find those things. So this is the point where you would write your pattern, or where you would just go ahead and copy these into code and figure out whether they're yes or no for which of the colors. Like it says, when matching with a pattern, I discovered that the %A class doesn't match diacriticals like the U umlaut. Nice little gotcha. Yeah, one more reason not to use pattern matching when you're looking for text, huh? No, they have their place. But yeah, that is a complication for sure. So we've got R39. At this point, we would go ahead and generate. We can see that we're missing we have green. Oh, we're missing a red here on that pattern. I remember that being the case in English, so I think they translated the English strings into German, probably French as well, and I'm expecting to see 39 in each of them. Just one of those things that as plugin writers of a very niche topic, you're going to see things like that where it's like, this is a really weird edge case. I wonder if it is known. Like, that's got to be a really low priority in SSG. If there's a bug somewhere that's like, we're missing a fireworks string, like, you would not delay a release, you would not delay a new feature, you would not... Like, that's the kind of thing, it's like, well, we've got an intern, they can work on it, right? Like, that's such a low priority, but it's there, and I wonder, like, is there a bug tracking that? I don't know. Let's see. Checking is talking about how classes are done in Lua, and it is interesting. I need to look into it more, and I think anyone who's familiar with programming in general, but not in Lua, just seeing the underpinnings of how would you make object-oriented polymorphism kind of thing with the constraints that everything in Lua is a table, if it's not a basic type. Agartha is pointing out that the terminology is overloaded. We can talk about character classes and pattern matching, and classes and object-oriented, and it's very different things. Yeah. Thanks, guys, who named that. It's okay. Okay, awesome. Well, I don't know if we've made a lot of progress here, but we've talked about how you would go about gathering strings from an NPC just talking in chat, saying random things, making use of the chat logging functionality plus some text processing capability built into some of our text editors. And again, if your text editor doesn't have that, it's not a requirement, but in this day and age, if you're using Notepad for your text editing, I guess, or its equivalent on other platforms, I guess I would say there are better options available, and I would encourage you to play around with those. We've also looked at some of the code that uses these strings, but also went off on tangents, and that's totally fine. So in the background, between this week and next week, I'm going to try to remember to incorporate the German and French strings in so that the changes I've made are a little bit more language agnostic, and not just for English people. Okay, well. Checking points out that Notepad++ is a more advanced version, a text editor than Notepad, and supports Lua markup. Neat. Yes, a lot of the more advanced text editors nowadays support code coloring of your source code based on, oh, it's a Lua file, oh, it's a JSON file, oh, it's a whatever. And it's good to see that Notepad++ supports Lua. Excellent. I'm been using today and recently Visual Studio Code, which also can do markup for code for Lua. But if for whatever reason you don't want to download this, or if it's a little bit heavier than you want for your plugin development, things like Notepad++, Sublime Text. I use Sublime Text for a lot of the D-Tracker development. It's fine. You don't need something fancier, but it's nice to have. Cool. All right. Well, I think that brings us to just about on the hour, and this is as good a place as any to pause for the week. So yeah, that's all we are going to cover today. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of LOTRO plugins. Thank you very much to all the excellent questions in chat. I do hope to see you all here next week, and until then, keep plugging along. All right, bye-bye now.